Breaking news tonight, Donald Trump's defense team has reportedly set new conditions on an interview between the special counsel Robert Mueller's team in the ongoing Russia investigation. Tonight, the New York Times reports the special counsel Robert S. Mueller III needs to prove before Mr. Trump would agree to an interview that he has evidence that Mr. Trump committed a crime and that his testimony is essential to completing the investigation, said Rudolph W. Giuliani, the president's lead lawyer in the case. Giuliani told the Times if they can come to us and show us the basis and that it's legitimate and that they have uncovered something, we can go from there and assess their objectivity. In May, Giuliani said the president and his lawyers would decide if Trump would sit down for an interview with Mueller's team after Trump's summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on June 12th. Last month, Giuliani pushed the deadline for a decision to July 4th. The special counsel's office declined to comment when NBC News reached out tonight. Joining us now is Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour and an MSNBC contributor, and David Corn is back with us. Welcome to you, Yamiche. Welcome back, David. David, this development, what do you make of it?
You know, there's a certain degree of absurdity here in that the president's team is trying to dictate to a federal prosecutor what the rules of the game are here. And that's never been the case before with any other citizen. And we have this past 2 weeks, we see the president again and again getting out there and basically delegitimizing the investigation and saying the Russians say they didn't meddle. Putin's a fine fellow. I mean, this is all in some ways a big distraction. They'd rather us focus on will he or won't he testify and lose sight of the big picture, what the Trump-Russia scandal is all about. And I think at the end of the day, an interview with Trump may not be that helpful because all his past depositions have been full of inaccurate statements and false statements, and I don't know what Mueller's going to get out of it.
But Yamiche, it's interesting because it's a PR game they're playing here. Let me just read you another excerpt from this New York Times story. It says the president's lawyers want Mr. Mueller to explain how the Justice Department gave him the authority to investigate possible obstruction of justice by the president in what began as a counterintelligence investigation into Russia's meddling. The lawyers also want evidence that the special counsel exhausted every other investigative measure before asking the president to answer questions, and that he's the only person who could provide them with the information they're seeking. Yamiche, some might say they're running out the clock here. They don't want this thing, having wanted it wrapped up and tied up neatly early on, they now don't want this wrapped up before the election, and so that it does not become an election issue.
Well, the president's lawyers are requesting conditions that they admit Robert Mueller will not accept or is likely not to accept because they want to have this aggressive strategy where they're trying to, where they're looking and acting like they are really interested in maybe still doing this interview when in fact they've already assessed that this is that they've said that they believe this is an investigation that's framing the president. Rudy Giuliani has said that maybe this is an investigation that planted a spy, which of course no evidence has shown. The president has called this a witch hunt dozens of times. So the fact that Rudy Giuliani is saying he wants to assess the objectivity tells you that Rudy Giuliani has already assessed it. I've talked to him several times. Other reporters have too. There's nothing about this investigation that Rudy Giuliani thinks is right. And a lot of lawyers that I've talked to that have asked the specific question, if you were Donald Trump's lawyers, would you want him to sit down in front of the special counsel? And I haven't found a lawyer in Washington who would tell me yes.
Right.
Because everyone says that the president sitting down with Robert Mueller could start lying to him or start saying things that are not true, even if he's not intentionally lying. And that could put him in some really hot water.
But David Corn, you are literally the guy who wrote the book on the Russia investigation. It is your work that was the work that really set this off, that people know about. And for anybody who hasn't read your book, they really ought to. But here's the problem. Increasingly, the public is starting to, the polls are indicating that the public is starting to worry about this investigation. They're starting to think it might be a little bit rudderless and that maybe it's going after this. So this president repeating of witch hunt all the time, Rudy Giuliani showing up on TV all the time and giving interviews, seems to be having some effect in making Americans, I don't know, tire of this or think maybe it's not going in the right direction.
The Trump White House, his lawyers, and many Republican leaders in Congress, including Representative Jim Jordan, who's in trouble for other matters these days, have spent a year and a half trying to discredit the investigation, have trying to say there's nothing here, saying there are no connections to look at. It doesn't matter that Paul Manafort was possibly in contact with a Putin-friendly oligarch during the campaign. They have shown more concern and more outrage over the ins and outs of the investigation than over the fact that Putin attacked America. It wasn't meddling, it was an attack. And this is all about trying to discredit Mueller, the investigation. They act as if he's taken a long time. He's been on the case for a little over a year. The Iran-Contra Independent Counsel took 6 years. There's nothing slow about this investigation. It's complicated. It takes time. You know, when Yamiche talks to Rudy Giuliani, his mission is to try to discredit the investigation, which looks at really the most important political scandal we've had in the history of this country.
It's interesting, though, because you talked about Jim Jordan last week in testimony before the House. Rod Rosenstein was there. Jim Jordan was going after him. So was Trey Gowdy. And Trey Gowdy actually said, Yamiche, to Rod Rosenstein about the investigation, finish it the hell up, because this country is being torn apart. I don't know if you recall how much time Trey Gowdy spent on Hillary Clinton's emails, but all of a sudden, I mean, this is the kind of the inconsistency here, right? The White House is slow walking this thing. Jim Jordan and Trey Gowdy and others in Congress are saying finish the hell up. Nobody really knows what people want done with this.
Well, what's really interesting is that the Benghazi investigation that went on and on and on.
Yeah.
They had no indictments. Robert Mueller has secured several indictments. Several people have pleaded guilty. But when I was out in Minnesota talking to Trump supporters, and they feel as though the president's being treated unfairly, and it's because his message is getting to them. The idea that he's being treated unfairly, that this investigation is completely really rigged. And there's this idea that the American public, when you have story after story coming out after Russia, even if you're a Democrat who thinks that the president should not be in office anymore, people are starting to get lost. It's easy for Americans to start getting tired of this. But I think what Rudy Giuliani said to the New York Times is really important. And it's that he said that they are also concerned that if the Democrats win, that he could be impeached. And there's this idea that Democrats have been trying to, at least Democratic leadership has been trying to be really cautious about the idea that electing Democrats means that you're going to impeach the president. But almost every reporter on Capitol Hill realizes that if the Democrats take back the House, they're going to start going after the president, and they're going to start saying, we need to figure out what's going on and what's legal. So he's in political jeopardy if this Robert Mueller investigation actually has teeth to it and actually sticks to him.
So what's the best plan, David Corn, for a guy like you who has been looking at this Russia problem since the inception, since we first learned about it? What's the best outcome? I'm not talking about for Donald Trump or Robert Mueller or Democrats or Republicans, but in the interest of our republic, in the interest of getting to the root of what is wrong, what Russia and others may be doing to our democracy. What is the best outcome here? For a quick end to this investigation, for a longer end to it, for a recommendation of impeachment, or for a report to Congress that describes everything that happened?
The American public needed two things after the election. They needed a full investigation of what Russia did and any activity of the Trump campaign or associates that was connected to that. And that was the province of the House Republican-led Intelligence Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee. The House Committee turned into a circus and basically fell apart. The Senate Intelligence Committee is still investigating, but we're not sure how deep and wide it's going. And then the second thing it needed was a look at whether any laws were broken by Russians, by other foreigners, or by Americans. And that's the job that Robert Mueller has to do. And these things should have gone on side by side, each on their own timetable. And at the end of the day, the public needs a full accounting of a Russian attack on American democracy and a full accounting of whether the President of the United States and his people were involved, or if they aided and abetted the attack, even if indirectly, by denying again and again that it was happening. And why the heck, even now, is Trump out there defending Putin? Those are questions that needed to be answered. And I'm afraid that because of Republican intransigence, I don't mean to sound partisan, we're not getting the answers we need. And we're going to see if Robert Mueller can provide some of those on the way to investigating any criminal actions.
All right, David, Yamiche, thanks to both of you.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.